Oh God. Okay. Sorry.
No,
Okay.
that was
Now you hear me. Now you hear me well,
yeah.
right?
Now it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
My fault. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So we'll look at the Mishnah on the top of Daf Vavam and Aleph, and we're talking about someone who gathers together his most small coins, and he's hoping that at some point he'll amass enough in his little pushka, that he'll have a machzis shekel. Or another case is where he's again designating money for a korban chatos. So every day he puts in, or every week he puts some money into this pushka. Hamachanes moos. Okay, so he's hoping that he'll know exactly when he has enough moos in the pot for either machzah shekel or for korban chatos. The Omar, and he declares, Hare elu, all these monies that I've collected, lishikli, they should be earmarked for my machzis hashekel. And then when he goes to check how much money he has in this little piggy bank, he finds out that he has more than a machzis hashekel. So does he get that money back, or do we say that once he said shikli, he's already designated it as mom and hegdish? Beit Shammai omrim mosaron nidava. Beit Shammai says that once he already was magdish, whatever money is even beyond the machzah shekel, then it's called a nidava. He's given again, the up to the machzah shekel is a chova because he's obligated. But if, let's say, it's a machzah shekel plus X, so that X now becomes a voluntary contribution. Now, what do we do with monies that's given to Hegdish as an Adova? So that's called Ketz HaMizbeach. Ketz HaMizbeach means that in event that the Mizbeach is not in operation, right now, just at this moment, there are no karbanos. They brought the tamid and they brought whatever daily karbanos had to be brought. So the halacha is that we don't want to leave the Mizbeach idle. So they take monies from the Ketz HaMizbeach, it's called, which are surplus monies, and those are earmarked for an Adava, and they'll bring it as a korban Adava. Now, in my Gemara, he quotes the Pirush of the Rosh, and the Rosh says that what we're seeing here in Beit Shammai is really a reflection of Beit Shammai Shita in Masechet Nazir, which I think appears, if I'm not mistaken, in other Masechtas as well. But on Daf Lamed Amid Beis, Beit Shammai hold that Hegdesh afilu b'tos avi Hegdesh. So even though, as we'll see, Beis Hillel, he's claiming, I made a mistake. It's an honest to goodness error. I thought that there was only a machzah shekel in the party. Little did I know that there was a surplus above and beyond that. I never meant to designate and sanctify that money for Hegdish. Doesn't matter. According to Beit Shammai, there's no din of toes because Beit Shammai holds that haflas peh, once you declare something as Hegdish, the Hegdish is called the gufo shel chefza, and now it's subject to Me'ilah, it belongs to Hegdish. Beis Hillel omrim mosaron chulin. According to Beis Hillel, the increment beyond the machzah shekel is chulin. He never had in mind to be magdish more than he has to. He wants to give a machzah shekel. He made a mistake, and hegdesh betos havitos. It's not hegdesh. So therefore, the increment above and beyond, the surplus beyond a machzah shekel is chulin. It's his money and has no sanctity. He can do whatever he wants with it. Okay, then. So that's the machlokas Beis Hillel Beit Shammai. Now, the Mishnah goes on to give a different case, a slightly different variation of the first case, but in that variation, even Beis Shammai is going to agree that the Mosai, the extra amount, is not Hegdish. It's chulin. What's the case? Sha'avi mehen shikli. He looks at the body, keeps putting money into the piggy bank, and he kept saying that from this money, I will dedicate my shekel. So he clearly indicates that not all the money that he's putting into this pot will be for Machzah shekel be hegdesh, but only my shekel's worth. So if he's saying that whatever money is here would amount to accrue to a Machzah shekel, I'll give to a shekel as Machzah shekel payment, then clearly the rest is going to be chulin. Shavin means that even Beit Shammai would agree, Shamosar chulin, because he never had in mind to be magdish it. He, from the get-go, he was only magdish a shekel's worth. Whereas in the Reisha, when he said Elu l'shikli, meaning anything in this potty is going to be earmarked for my shekel, then he means anything inside. And that's where Beit Shammai says that it is hegdish. And you earmark it for the dove. Now, the Mishnah in the Sefer is going to apply the same rules to a case of money that was collected piecemeal in a bank for the purpose of a karban chatos. And here we'll see the halacha change. It's a little bit different than in shekel. So the Reisha is going to be the case of elu lichatasi, means the following, that he gathers together mos, he declares elu lichatasi, which is very similar to the first case, the Reisha that we had in shekel, where he said elu l'shikli. So clearly Beit Shammai are going to say that the entire pot, and even the increment above and beyond what it costs him to buy a karban chatos, will be dedicated for hegdesh, and it'll be an adava. But here, in the case of elu lechatasi, as opposed to elu l'shikli, Beis Hill are going to be moded Beit Shammai. Shavin, shamosar nidava. That anything above and beyond the monies, the funds that he needs for the karban chatos, is earmarked as an adava. And the Gemara is going to quote, the Mishnah itself is going to quote Rabbi Shimon, who's going to explain why elu lechatasi is different than elu l'shikli, and in elu lechatasi, even Beit Shammai, even Beis Hill are moded to Beit Shammai. And therefore the Mosar is linidava. However, if he gathers together the money and he makes a declaration, Avi mehen chatasi, not that all the money in this bank is going for a chatos, but from the money in this bank, I will purchase a karban chatos. Shavin here, even Beit Shammai agree, Mosar chulin, because in this last case, we have a similar case to what we had in the Reisha. It's almost identical. When I say the Reisha, I mean the Sefer of the Reisha, where he said Avi mehem shikli, and here he said Avi mehem chatosi. Amar Rabbi Shimon Mabed Shkalim l'chatos. In the parallel cases of the Reisha, of both the Reisha, and the Reisha the Sefer, where he declared Harei elu l'shikli or Harei elu l'chatosi, why would Beis Hillel differentiate between the two cases? Why is it that in the case of Harei elu l'chatasi, Beis Hillel agree that all the money is hegdesh? Reb Shimon explains, Ella, the only difference between the two is that shel shkalim yeshlem kitzva, ulechatos ein la kitzva. In the case of a Machzas HaShekel, we know exactly how much money he needs. So therefore, when he declares Avi mehem shikli, no, I'm sorry, go back to the Reisha, sorry. When he declares Harei elu l'shikli, Beis Hillel understand that he wants to give exactly a Machzas Shekel, not a penny more. Anything beyond that Machzas Shekel is pure chulin. But in the case where he says elu l'chatosi and chatos has no kitzvah, there's no set amount of money for a chatos. He might buy it. Let's say he buys a goat for a chatas, a sawyer, so that he can buy it, a small little sawyer, a kid, and get it for cheap. He might get a different one that's more expensive. And therefore, in this case, that there's no exact sum of money, so then he could have bought, like we said before, a smaller animal which costs less on the market, because maybe they charge you per weight of the animal. He could have bought a Behema Shmena, a feta animal, and then it's sold at Dam Merubim. Therefore, the assumption is that all the most that he has, since any amount of money, it's almost the sky's the limit, could be potentially money earmarked for a chatos. He had in mind that he wasn't counting his pennies, assuming that, when he gets to a certain amount, that's it. That's the sky's the limit. He has a limit. He doesn't have a limit. The sky's the limit. And now the Mishnah says that let's take a moment to understand Beit Shammai. And the Mishnah quotes Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda is now going to reveal the fundamental principle that underlies Beit Shammai. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, why is it that in the case of the Reisha Elu L'Shikli, even the extra money beyond the shekel is Hegdesh, and it's dedicated as a korban nedava? Af L'Shkalim Ein Lahem Kitzva. Wow, this is really interesting. We assumed, and certainly Rabbi Shimon made it crystal clear, that in the case of chatos, ein lem kitzvah. You could buy a smaller animal, lesser animal, there's no set price. But in the case of shkalim, how can you call that ein lem kitzvah? So for this, Rabbi Yehuda is going to give us a whole history lesson. And he tells us the following. Shekisha'alu Yisrael min hagola. In other words, after Golus Bavel ended and Ezra and Nehemiah came back with what's called Aliyah Shnia to establish the second Commonwealth, as we call it, the Bayis Sheni. So at that point, the matbea would the currency of that time was called a darkon. And a darkon is worth 2 sloim. Vayushoklim darkonos. In other words, they would bring a darkon for Masechet Shekel, and it was worth, as we said before, 2 sloim. And they would expect to get back 1 selah, which is half of a darkon. But now, after that period of time, in other words, later on in history, the value of coins depreciated. And now, instead of doing business with a darkon, they started doing business with a selah, which, as we said before, was half of a darkon. Chazu lishkol shloim. So instead of bringing a darkon, they would bring a selah. And the impression you get from the mission of Rabbi Yehuda is that Masechet Shekel is not a davar sheishlo kitzvah. It's not an exact sum. It really fluctuates and changes, shall we call it chronologically, sequentially, reflecting the main coin of the day. Every currency has its main coin. Like, for example, I would say, I guess I'm not sure if I'm right about this, that the dollar is the main currency. So you'd have to give a Masechet Shekel. What's the main currency back at the time of Golus, when Golus Bavel ended? It was a darkon. Later on, it became a selah. Now, if you ask me what's the value of the two, a darkon is actually worth twice the selah. But it matters not, because the amount of money they gave for a Masechet Shekel would be half of the main currency. So the word shekel in Rabbi Yehuda's frame of reference is not a value that we can pinpoint, and it would change, with inflation and deflation or different coins and currencies. No. The word shekel is symbolic of whatever's the main currency at that time. Even if it's worth more or less than the original Masechet Shekalim. So therefore, when
That's what we do today, isn't it?
Say it again.
Isn't that what we do today? For example, a pidyon ben.
Probably. Well, I don't know. You have to know. You have to know more about pidyon ben.
I don't know.
But from Masechet Shekel, well, today it's only a zechel Masechet Shekel. But
right.
As far as I know, you give $50. And I'm trying to remember, what the currency. What's the currency in? In another country, in Canada, it's also a dollar. But
I thought it was like silver. I thought in Canada it was like silver dollars. I don't know.
That's why I think pidyon ben might be a little bit more.
Might be different.
Might be a little bit more serious. Yeah, I think. Yeah. So now they gave the Masechet Shekel would now become a chatzi seller, and after that period of time, once again, it seems like the value of the matbeos for mischar, for business, went down a second time, actually a third time. Chazru lishkol tvoim. Okay, now there's a new matbeo which is called teva. I'm not exactly sure why the matbeo was called teva. Which in English, I guess, which has nature, but I think it has more something to do with the word matbea, probably. In any event, so now at this point they brought tvoim. Right? Tvoim is the plural of the word teva. Then that went down apparently as well. Big Chulish called dinrim. So now they wanted to give a Masechet Shekel from a matbea which is called the dinar. I guess the dinar now became your mainstay coin. But at some point, lo kiblu mihen. Chachamim said that we can't tolerate it. I guess it was getting ridiculous. When inflation caused such a devaluation of the currency that it was worth a fraction of the original Masechet Shekel. At that point, the Chachamim put their foot down, and they said, "You want to add something to the value of a Masechet Shekel as the Torah understood it. That's fine, but we're not going to accept less than a Masechet Shekel." So here in my Gemara, we have a Meiri and a Rosh. And apparently, if I'm not mistaken, the Rambam also accepted this approach, that lo iskimu chachamim imohem mipnei she mutar lahosif al chiyuv Torah lefi hamatbea hayotzi b'hotza ulam osur lifchos mimenu. And that's like the bottom of, there's a cutoff point. Nivtza she'af hashkolim ein lem kitzvah. Even after the Chachamim made that enactment that we won't accept these very inexpensive, non-valuable coins, but nevertheless we still have halacha that there's a fluctuation of the matbea. So therefore it's Eilem Kitzvah. And sometimes, let's say, you would give more than a Masechet Shekel. So keep in mind that Beit Shammai's case in our Mishnah, where he said Elu Shkoli, is a case where he counted up his mos in the piggy bank, and as it turns out, he had more than a Masechet Shekel. Says Rabbi Yehuda, we now understand Beit Shammai perfectly, because since Beit Shammai holds there's no separate din of Masechet Shekel, Masechet Shekel is the minimum value, but you can go beyond that. So therefore, when he collects his coins in this bank, he can go beyond the Masechet Shekel. Well, Rav Shimon rejects Rabbi Yehuda outright. He says, no. Shkolim is not Eilem Kitzvah. Afal Piche, even though sometimes they add and go beyond the value of the Torah obligation, nevertheless, Yad Kulam Shove. It means that we want to demand that everyone give the same amount. Why is that? Because the Torah says, Ha'ashir lo yarbe, v'adal lo yamayit. So the Torah says, you know what? We're not going to allow a system where the rich guys will give more, they'll get a bigger chelik in the Trumas HaLichka, and the poor people will give less. No, no, no. We want it to be uniform. This is Torah socialism. And ethically, it means that God says, as long as, how does the Mishnah say in Avos? So the Torah says, we don't want to go beyond a certain top value. So that's called the Dover Sheish Lo Kitzvah. Now, I don't know what Rabbi Yehuda is going to counter. We'll have to see the sugya inside, because Rabbi Shimon seems to have a very, very strong argument here that you cannot tell me that there's a fluctuation and you can give more than a machzah shekel. Aval chatos, but chatos, I agree with you, is a Dover Shein Lo Kitzvah. Anyone could buy a chatos if he buys the most beautiful, expensive animal. It's a pedigree animal, and it's got a shtar yuchsin that goes back to David Avram. So the animal sells for $1,000. That's okay, even though the Oni can't afford that. It's therefore zevevi b'sela, zevevi b'shtayim, zevevi b'sholosh. Everyone pays the amount of money that they feel is suitable for their chatos. Now the Gemara goes back to the Mishnah. Amchanes. And the Mishnah says, the Gemara says, "V'chulei." We'll read it again. Hamachanis mos v'yomer harei elu l'shikli Beit Shammai yomer mosaron l'nidava Beis Hillel yomer mosaron l'chulin. And now the Gemara clarifies the case in which they argue Beis Hillel and Beit Shammai. Rav Yossi b'shem Loza, Rav Loza, I think is Rabbi Eliezer in the Bavli. Ma pligin. In what case are they arguing? And he says the following: B'mechanes prot wrote. Like prot wrote, I think comes to the word pruta in the plural protot. So in other words, he actually amasses together an amazing amount, a very large amount of prutos, of very small coins. Whenever he gets a pruta, he puts it into this pocketbook, into this piggy bank, as we call it. And he dedicates it for a machzas shekel, and Beis Hillel say that mosaron chulin, because again, he made a mistake. He didn't think that he had gone beyond what was necessary for fulfilling his obligation of machzas shekel. No, he was of the impression that he didn't have enough. I think today, if I'm not mistaken, in modern technology, they have these kinds of little piggy banks where I think it tells you exactly how much is inside. As you put it in, it lights up. Oh, you're up to this number.
Okay.
Am I right?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think there is such a thing.
Right.
But since he had no clue how much money he had amassed, therefore it's tos, hegdish b'tos. So again, they still hold hegdish b'tos, lav hegdish. Avol b'yomer elu l'shikli. In a case where he has money in his pocket or in his hand, and he knew that he's got more than a machzah shekel, and in one fell swoop, he took a whole bunch of coins, realizing full well that he's got here a sum total that exceeds beyond the machzah shekel. V'frisha b'vasachas. In such a case, is kol amamodi shamosarim nidava. The whole nation, meaning everybody, including Beis Hillel, would agree that Mosar Nidava, there's no hegdish b'tos. He saw exactly how much he was giving, and he presented more than a machzah shekel. he wanted to be makdish the whole collection, the whole pocketbook. However, we can only accept a machzah shekel because lo yarben. And therefore, on the one hand, we understood that he indicates that he wants the whole pocketbook to be hegdesh. On the other hand, machzah shekel could only be up to a machzah shekel, not beyond. So the money beyond that, even Beis Hillel would agree in this case, would fall to the Kates HaMizbeach for Mosar Linadom. Okay. That's what we have so far. Now, what we're going to see as we go along is that there's another take, a different understanding of Beis Hillel. So we have Rabbi Lazar, and now we get to Rabbi Chia Rabbi Biva. And they hold, B'Shem Rabbi Lazar, in other words, it seems that they had a different tradition than Rabbi Yossi had regarding Rabbi Lazar's interpretation of Beis Hillel. So this is like a whole Chadgadia over here. And they said the following: Mapligin, again, what's the machlokas between Beis Hillel Beit Shammai? B'machanes prodrot, avol bi omer elu l'shikli kol ama modi shehamosarim chulin. The first Girsa said everybody agrees in Beis Hillel that the Mosarim fall for the Dava because he knew very well that he had exceeded beyond the Machzah Shekel. According to the second version, even Beit Shammai would agree that the Mosar is Chulin. Now, why? What's the compelling logic over here? So I have here a quote from the Rash Surleo, and he writes, Kevot kavanoso laharbos al matzis hashekel, havi ki ein matana, vavi ki masna mashikosim v'torah, the ein bidvar klu. In other words, since he said elu shikli, not the way Rabbi Lazar, the first Girsa, the first version, understood it. Elu shikli means I know very well is more than a shekel, and therefore I'm donating large, as we say here in Israel. I'm giving you gratuitously more money than you need. That'll be for Hegdish. Sei gesund, stark. No. He said the words Elu l'shikli. And once he says the words Elu l'shikli, then he wants to create a new shekel, so to speak. He has in mind to carve, like you go to a good smorgasbord, right? So they have the carving station. I think I saw something at your wedding. I'm not sure. It was hard to see. I kept screaming out, Ira, but you didn't hear me. I was waving to you.
I think I remember that, yeah.
You couldn't hear me. And at some point I wanted to tell you to fix your tie, but you couldn't hear me. Anyway. So comes along Rabbi Chia and Rabava, and they say, you know what? What are you talking about? Even Beis Shammai would say here that we have to disqualify the extra money, the surplus, because he declared that it would be shekel, and it can't be shekel. It's masa mashikosu b'Torah, and we have a principle that goes masa mashikosu b'Torah to no batel. You cannot change the Torah law. Now I'll tell you, Ira, this bothers me a lot because the Gemara tells us in Masechet Makos and elsewhere that although Masa Mashikosa B'Torah to know Batel, he can't contradict the Torah, that's only in certain ritual law. For example, marriage. He wants to create a new kind of a marriage without Sher Ksus V'Yona. He can't do that. Let's say he would say, I'm being makdish a chatos, but I want to be able to eat its meat for 2 days like it Rich Lovin. That's Masal Mashikosa B'Torah. He can't change the laws. But in the case of Dover Sheb and Mammon, when it's a matter of giving money to someone, I have a right to say, this is the money I want to give. And even if the Torah doesn't demand that amount of money, is Masal Mashikosa B'Torah to know Kayam. So what would be an example of Mammon? Let's say, for example, if he marries a woman and let's say he's chayav according to Torah law to give her a ksuba of Masayim Zuz. Lamazogin, I mean. And she says, you know what? I'm willing to accept whatever condition you make, and he wants to give her 100 zuz, 150 zuz. So she accepted it. That's called a Tanai Sheba Mama. The Gemara says in Baba Basra that I can change the Yerusha laws. Instead of giving my Bechar Pishnayim, I can decide that I want to give him 1.5 instead of 2. Here also, he's deciding what he wants to give to Hegdish. Again, he can't change the Masechet Shekalim law, but he can change the amount of money he wants to give to Hegdish. And Allah only requires X amount of money to Hegdish, or Masechet Shekalim. He wants to give more than that. And when Reb Chia here and the others, they say that, no, in this case, even Beit Shammai would agree, Mosara and Chulin, because he's a Masla Mashkos. What do you mean he's a Masla? Why can't he give more than that? Now, in the footnote, he quotes another commentary that's called Pirush Rabbeinu Mishulam, very common, apparently, in Shkolim. And he says, Mikeven sheyodea kama yesh biyado. On the one hand, he knows that he has more than a Masechet Shekel in his hand. But yodea she'ein lahosif ha-Masechet Shekel. So this guy's a big lamdan. Not only does he know what amounts of money he has in his hands, he also knows the halacha that he can't give more than a Masechet Shekel. It's therefore ein kavanaso litein yoser mi-Masechet Shekel. Normally we would say, yeah, you know what? He knows it's more than a Masechet Shekel. He must be thinking that he wants to give extra money. That's what I thought the pshat was. Says Rabbeinu Mishulam, no. We're not sure whether or not he wants to give more than a Masechet Shekel to Hegdish, meaning 1 plus Masechet Shekel plus an additional gift for the Bedek HaBayis, for the Hegdish. No. We're going to assume that he knows very well that the max amount of money that he can give is a Masechet Shekel, that Bezdin, the Gizbar representing Hegdish, will not accept more than a Masechet Shekel. And therefore we assume that he didn't have any intention to give more than a Masechet Shekel. Reb Chia says, Masnisa Messiah. The Mishnah itself is going to bring a proof. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this proof that we're about to learn is a proof for Rav Beva. But the only problem is that I'm not sure if Rav Beva is the same as Rav Bibi. This could be an afkamina this week on Tuesday. Anyway, so who is this Bibi? Anyway, he says that I want to bring a proof from our Mishnah to Rav Bibi. I have to admit that although it says Rav Biva in the Gemara, I think it's Rav Bibi. There's got to be some sort of just an amendation here to the text. Masnisa Messiah Rav Bibi, who says that in the case of Elul Shikli, is everybody agrees, even Beit Shammai would agree that the Mosar is Chulin. This now we learned in the Mishnah, Rav Shimon Mamei Shkolim Lechatos, El Shashkolim Yeshlem Kitzvah, Ulechatos Ein Lo Kitzvah. And therefore, Reb Chia, who's now quoting our Mishnah as a raya, he thinks that according to Reb Shimon, both Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai agree that when a person says Elul Shikli, so he means Elul Shikli means a davar sheish lo kitzvah. Oh, so if it's a davar sheish lo kitzvah, just 1 second. Let's just go back. If it's a davar sheyesh lo kitzvah, so then let's just review this. Reb Shimon says that the Torah says ha'ashil lo yarbe mi machzah shekel. So certainly he meant to give only up to a machzah shekel, and not beyond. But again, Reb Shimon was explaining Beis Hillel. Now the Gemara is going a step further. Reb Chia thinks that Reb Shimon is saying what he's saying, even according to Beit Shammai. Ma'anan kaiminon. Knows what? It's like Hachi Mayaskin. What are we talking about? In the context of Reb Shimon, who differentiates between Shkolim and Chatos. In the Omer, if it's like in the case like the Seifa, She'avi Mehen Shikli, is called Ama Modish Amosar and Chul. There was never a machlokes about the situation of Avi Mehen Shikli. Even Beit Shammai agreed that the Mosar is Chul. Im Omer She'avi Mehen Chatosi is called Ama Modish Amosar Chul. Once again, because he says Mehen. So in these cases, there's no difference between Shkolim and Chatas. That can't be what Reb Shimon is talking about. Ella, Kain Anan Kaiminon, we must be assuming that Rabbi Shimon's statement is be Omer Elul Shikli, goes back to the Reisha. And here Reb Shimon differentiates between Shkolim and Chatas. And the reason for that is that Shkolim, Al Yidei Shekitzvasan Min Torah, right? The Torah gives you an exact amount that you give, and you cannot give beyond that, is therefore Mosarim Chulin. Chatos, Al Yidei Shein Kitzvasim Min Torah, Mosaron Nidava. So this really supports Rabbi Biva, who says that in the case of Elul Shikli, Mosaron Chuli. But I still don't understand then. So if Elul Shikli is Mosaron Chulin, so what is the machlokes between Beit Shammai and Beis Hillel? I'm missing that one piece of the puzzle. Let me go over it one more time. It's he says that Ella, we must be talking about the Omer Elul Shikli. And then we're explaining Beis Hillel. So if we're explaining Beis Hillel, the Omer Elul Shikli. So I think what's happening here is that we're reinterpreting the Mishnah. That Elul Shikli is not a machlokas between Beis Hillel and Beit Shammai. But what are they arguing about? B'machanes protrot. That's the case where Beit Shammai says Moser Linidova. And why is that? So now let's try to understand the difference between Mechanes Frotrot and Elul Shikli. Elul Shikli, everybody agrees, even Beit Shammai, that he knows that the maximum he can give is a machzah shekel and kitzvasan min Torah. So therefore he can't give more than that, and therefore even Beit Shammai would agree that Mosaron Chulin. So when does Beit Shammai say Mosaron and Dava? That's a case of Mechanes Frotrot. Why is Mechanes Frotrot different? Let's see if we can figure this out. Let me just see. What would be different about Mechanes Frotrot? So we're talking about smaller coins.
You don't want to say the value is different, right?
I don't know, because right now the Gemara is not operating with that premise here. I don't think. Chanes protrot. Here's where Beit Shammai are going to say that the Mosar is the Dava, and he has small coins, right? He's amassing a large volume of small coins, and he keeps dedicating it for Masechet Shekel. What's the pshat here? Why is that different? I mean, he went beyond. He went beyond the Masechet Shekel value. Why is that different than Elu L'Shikli? Apparently, there's something about the declaration of Elu L'Shikli that gives it a different status. Let me just see. I have here the Taklin Charitim. Let's see if he, by chance, sheds a light on this. He says, the Omer Elu L'Shikli Natal Yodo Malea Mos. The Omer Elu L'Shikli. Therefore, what? Then it's different because. So, 1 second, I want to know about Frotrot. I don't see it. All right, we'll leave that as a question, and hopefully we can get back to it. I may have, just give me a second here. Again, see. I'm just going to look in one more place and see if I can find it. Okay, I don't want to waste your time. What do you have in front of you, Ira? You have a regular classic Gemara Shekalim?
Yeah, I just have a regular Gemara.
Regular Gemara Shekalim. Because somewhere, I don't know exactly where.
I don't have the art school.
Okay, just give me, sorry, one more minute here. See, I didn't get the chance to unpack from Shabbos yet, believe it or not. Let me see where I would have misplaced. Just gonna give it a shot. He's quoting the Taklin Charit, and again, I didn't see this inside. I looked at the Taklin Charit. Anyway, he says the following. Rabbi Yossi understood that the machlokes was in a case of mechanes protrot, and the machlokes is about hegdesh bitos. Beit Shammai hold it is hegdesh. Beit Hillel has it's not hegdesh. Okay. And why? Because since he continuously adds another pruta day by day or week by week, whatever it is, he doesn't realize that he's gone beyond. But if he says Elu l'shikli, according to Rabbi Yossi's version of Rabbi Lazar, he knows exactly how much it is, and he's not making any mistakes over here. So therefore, Beis Hillel would agree that it's not a hegdish betos, and therefore it is hegdish mosar v'linadav. Oh, ularav Bibi cholkim b'machanes protrot. Okay, fine. So that we know, because then he's not aware of when he exceeded the machzah shekel. Therefore, it's hegdish betos. That's machlokes Beis Hillel Beit Shammai. Avol bi omer elu l'shikli, and now it's going to be just the reverse. That everybody, even Beis Shammai, agree that above and beyond the shekel is chulin. Why is that? Even she'ein kantos, yodea kama yesh biyado, el sherotz al harbos al machzah shekel, bein yochel lahosav al machzah shekel. In other words, even Beit Shammai will agree that ein other masna al mashakos b'Torah. Very nice that you want to give, very generous, want to give more than machzah shekel. The Torah is not allowing more than machzah shekel. So, in a case of an honest to goodness mistake, so then that's called protrot. Then comes along Beit Shammai and say, well, we recognize a hegdish even when there was a mistake involved. But if you deliberately want to give more than a machzah shekel, that's a case of ha'omer harei elu l'shikli, meaning he's holding on to more than a shekel. And he says, I want to give this all as a shekel. He's violating the law of the Torah. Does that make any sense, Ira? I mean, I don't know. I know you're doing a few different things at once, but
no.
I don't blame you. You probably had a whole day of teaching today, no?
No. Miriam just came in, so I just had to say hello.
So now I what I want to do now is he quotes a Merkeves HaMishnah, which is a super commentary on the Rambam Hilchot Shekalim. But who piresh? Now let's see if he says something a little different. Dil Rabbi Yossi machlakoson kishahoya malaket protrot. It sounds like he's in the process of like collecting these small coins. The hischil laket, already early in the game, Omar declared, Hareni malaket mos lishkoli. Okay, Hareni malaket mos lishkoli.
Does that mean he converted? Sorry, he converted. What does that mean? Malaket mos lishkolim.
I'm not sure. We'll try. We'll try to read the next line, and maybe we'll put it all together.
Okay.
I'm not promising any results here. Okay. He says, "V'dafka b'protrot sovrim Beis Hillel shemosar chulim shekevan sheyesh kitzvah l'shkolim kavanoso." What did he mean when he said those magic words? Haredi malaket mos l'shikli shani malaket mos umehem evchar l'shikli. Again, it sounds like a joke, but it reminds me of a stamp collection. He collects stamps. I don't know if you collected stamps. When I was a kid, I remember I went through different crazes. So at one point in my life, I had a stamp collection. Right. Gee, if I had it today, it might be worth something. Who knows? But no fair. Anyway, so you collect stamps, and then you're going to put the choice stamps in an album. You'll decide later on. You'll go through all and you'll classify them according to their different qualities. So he was malaket mos, malaket fruit, right? Prutos, harini malaket prutos lishikli, and what Beis Hillel understood was that when he says harini malaket mos lishikli, I'm going to choose later on from all these mos my choicest mos, and I'm going to give them for Masechet Hashekel. Umehem evchar l'shikli. I mean, I don't understand the psychology because all prutos look the same. Maybe, you know what? Maybe certain prutos were shinier, the mint was nicer, or maybe
Newer. Could have been the
newer,
dates. Yeah.
or maybe Dafka the old ones had a certain value because they were rare. I don't know.
Right.
He's a coin collector. I don't know, but he's going to decide later on. He wants to pick the choicest ones for
Right.
the shekel. Aval had no till mos. If he's deliberate, he knows he has mos in his hand, and he declares Elul Shikli Modim Beisilel Shekavanoso Lenadiv Eskulam Lishkolim Umosaram Nidava. And I guess again, it's not Masna Mashkos Torah because he knows that there are two elements here. There's X plus Y. There's going to be the Maksa Shekel in these mohs, and there's going to be Y, the additional gift for the case of his path for the Nidava. Ula Rav Bibi Machlekosam b'Machnes Prutrot the Beit Shammai Savri Kevan Sha'omar L'Shikli Kavanoso Sheyeh Machtis HaShekel Mehem L'Shiklo. So that even when he makes that declaration of Hareini Malaked Mos L'Shikli, Beit Shammai hold that once he said L'Shikli, that extra word L'Shikli, he meant to say that amongst these various coins, I will give a matzah shekel as shikli. So here's where Beit Shammai disagree with Beis Hillel, and they hold that the Mosar is Nidava. Because he's saying Lishikli, that means amongst these modes, there'll be those that are given for shekel, and the rest are for hegdish. The kevan she'ein breira v'lo yodim eze machzis l'shiklo kol hatarovas b'safek shkolim. In other words, initially when he put this all together, he didn't decide which of the coins he's going to earmark as machzah shekel. So every single coin in that mixture potentially could be the coin that he chooses, but we're holding out ein breira. And therefore, since every single coin could be the matzah shekel, it's a candidate. Therefore, Havile Amosa Nedava. Ubeis Hill Sovri Shigam Beprotor Kavanoso Shiahea Kol Shkolim the Kavan Sheyesh Shekel Kitzva Dino Kimosar Shkolim Shehen Chulin. So that even in the case where he's collecting these prutos, Beis Hill insists that he wants not Hegdesh, there's no A plus B, he wants A. He just wants Shkolim. That's all he wants. And Shkolim has a kitzvah. So anything beyond that kitzvah is Chulin. So as Beit Shammai understand that since he hasn't designated which of these modes will be chosen for Matzos HaShekel, therefore we're going to apply the principle of Ein Breira, and the entire mixture will be given as Hegdesh. Because he's making a declaration that from these monies which exceed beyond shekel, I want to give some of it for Hegdish and some of it for Shkolim. And Beis Hillel say no. What he has in mind is not some sort of tarovis here of Mos. He has in mind to give a shekel, and he knows the shekel has a kitzvah, and anything beyond that is simply chulin. It's not. It's nothing more than a chulin. Let me read some of the notes here in the English. I was trying to find it. I finally found it. he says that Rabbi Yossi, in the name of Rabbi Elazar, says what the Beit Shammai and Beis Hillel disagree about, where he collects the money piecemeal. And in the note, he says he saves up coins over the period of time, bit by bit. Regarding such a case, Beis Hillel says that the excess is chulin because his hakdasha, his consecration of the excess coins was an error. Avol bi omer elu shikli. He has a handful of coins in his, where he grasps it, and it contains more than a shekel, and he declares, these are for my shekel, is called amamodi shemut mosaron nidav. Everyone agrees that the excess is used for voluntary offerings because he knows how much money is in his hand. He intended to consecrate the entire amount. And since, however, he cannot give more than the machzah shekel, therefore the excess is for nidav. Here, Rabbibi b'shem Rabbi Elazar, they say it the opposite. Ma pligin b'machnis b'protrot, where he collects the money piecemeal. But if he grasps a handful of coins and declares these are for my shekel, then kol amamodi, everyone agrees that the excess is chulin, exact opposite. Since he made no mistake that the concentration can be said, since he made no mistake such that the consecration can be said to have been made in error, rather he intended to consecrate only the amount needed for a shekel obligation. Okay, and it's forbidden to give more than the prescribed amount. So therefore, even Beit Shammai would agree that the excess is chulin. Rav Chia says that the Mishnah supports Rav Bibi, that the excess is chulin according to everyone. This not because we learned in the Mishnah, Rav Shimon ma bein shkolim lechatos el shkolim yeshnam kitzvah lechatos ein lem kitzvah manan kaimon. Okay, we worked it all out. That it has to be ella kenanan kaimon be omer elu shikli. So he's holding on to a handful of coins, and he says these are my shekel. And in that case, Reb Shimon explains that the difference between shkolim and chatos is that shkolim al yidesha kitzvasam min Torah mosaron chulin, and chatos al yidesha ein kitzvasam min Torah mosaron nidav. So the Mishnah is a riot to Rabbi Bibi against Rabbi Yossi because it's evident from Rabbi Shimon's statement that in the case where a person grasps a handful of coins and he says, "Let these be for my shekel," the excess is chulin, even according to Beit Shammai. Now the Gemara is going to defend Rabbi Yossi. Ma ovid le Rabbi Yossi b'shem Rabbi Lezer. What does he do with Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah? Pasale b'mechanes protrot u b'beis Hillel. It's dealing with a case of somebody who collects coins piecemeal and in accordance with the shita of Beis Hillel. That is, Rabbi Yossi explains that Rabbi Shimon is not discussing a case in which he had a grasp. He grasped a handful of coins. Then even Beis Hillel would agree that the excess is a nedava. Rather, if Shimon refers to where the person saved up coins little by little, and his point is to explain why, in that case regarding Shkolim, Beis Hillel maintained against Beis Shammai that the excess is chulin. With regard to chatas, Beis Hillel admit to the sheet of Beis Shammai that the excess is adonim. Okay, then. So this is where we'll stop, and thank you.